Hi, I'm Tom Birkeland, author of An Introduction to the Policy Process and professor of public policy at North Carolina State University. I hope you enjoy the book, and I hope you find these videos useful. Well, welcome to the third branch of government, the judicial branch, which is the subject of this video. The third branch of government doesn't occupy a lot of space in the Constitution, but it's a very important branch of government, as you'll learn in this video. One thing I want you to keep in mind as you read the book, think about the role of the judicial branch, is think about the often stated claim that courts don't make laws, they simply interpret them. In point of fact, courts make laws. They make case law, and case law has an important influence on the public policy process, as you'll learn in this video. So now let's turn to the judicial branch. Alexander Hamilton in Federalist 78 said that the judiciary, the third branch of government, is the least dangerous branch of government because they possess neither the power of the purse nor the power of the sword. In other words, they can't spend money and they can't force anybody to do anything. So the courts are neither impotent. I mean, they do have a role, but they're not all powerful. And the source of the court's power in the United States derives from this notion of judicial review, which you've probably heard of in the civics class. Many of you will have heard of Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court case, in which the Supreme Court held that the courts can invalidate the unconstitutional enactments of the legislative or executive branches. This is a very powerful aspect of American politics, and it's at the heart of the old saying that we're a nation of laws and not of men. In other words, that we're governed by the rule of law. You've probably heard a lot about the notion of the rule of law in the last 4 years because it's come up several times. And the role of the courts in judicial review is really important, and it's been respected throughout most of our constitutional history. Not everywhere, not all the time. But the most important thing to keep in mind about the judicial branch as an actor in the policy process is it relies on enforcement by other actors. The executive branch and the legislative branch and private actors. So the question is always in the policy process is, why are most court decisions respected? And I suspect it's because we have a political culture in the United States that values the rule of law, that believes in the legitimacy of the judiciary, and that believes that the best place to solve certain kinds of disputes is in the judicial system. And we also have a deep belief that people can appeal to the judicial system when appeals to the legislative and executive branch fall short, such as during the Civil Rights era, where African Americans had to seek to have their rights declared and laid out by the courts when the executive and legislative branches were not as active in addressing civil rights. So what this means is the judicial branch does make policy. Remember the definition of public policy. It's the definition of public policy is what government chooses to do or not to do. And what happens in the courts is different than legislation. Their logic is legal reasoning and the logic of judicial review. That is to say, it's not quite the same as the give and take of the legislative process, but there is policy being made in the judicial branch, and it is under our system entirely appropriate that the courts do such a thing. But the courts are undemocratic institutions, especially at the federal level in the United States, because we do not elect judges and they're appointed for life. So a lot of people say that the courts are undemocratic, and the rejoinder to that is, was our republic designed as a democracy? And you've heard a lot of talk about this sort of thing in the last 2 or 3 years, and it's fair to say that the best way to describe the United States is as a democratic republic. And the question that has always confronted our constitutional order is, how do we balance the popular will with constitutional limit? The Constitution, to a large extent, constrains the actions of government. The Constitution, except for in a few places, doesn't say what the government can do. It in many ways says what the government cannot do, the Bill of Rights in particular. And where it does list those things that government can do, it's intended to make it a relatively restrictive list. Although in the last 75 to 100 years, the Constitution has been interpreted to give the federal government a great deal more influence and power than it seemed to exert during the first, say, half of our constitutional history. But the essential question is, how do we balance the popular will, that is, what we together in our electoral systems and in our elected branches of government, how do we balance what we want to do as a majority with the limits on the majority's power to impose costs and burdens on a minority of people? And that's what the courts get involved with a lot. And so the courts have made in recent years, this last 75 to 100 years, sometimes unpopular decisions, saying that it's constitutional to burn the flag, or that gay marriage is legal as a matter of equal protection under the laws. And so a lot of people may be opposed to that, but the courts have a role in saying, this is what our Constitution means, and this is what the duties of the government and the duties of citizens are under our constitutional order. The big question I would ask is, what would our system look like without judicial review? In other words, if you had a system in which there was no branch of government to declare what a law meant, or whether it's unconstitutional, or whether its application is in violation of the letter of the law, what would replace that? Where would people go in the policy process to press claims for rights or benefits of government programs, of government policies, if they didn't have the judicial branch as a forum in which to press their claims?
Thanks for watching this video. As always, I really enjoy hearing from students and teachers about the book and about public policy. Feel free to reach out to me at tom@tomberkland.com or visit my website, tomberkland.com. Thanks again for watching.